We've got lots of space and like closer to me. Feel free to move in, to change where you're sitting if you happen to be sitting. You know, for instance, Louise, if Ryan just happens to be too tall, whack him on the back of his head.
That's right.
I'm okay.
I also want to check in, Sandy. So I extinguished the incense, thinking that might have been exacerbating things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then had the windows open and thought, oh my God, is the smoke outside worse than in? and you will see, I mean, actually, so, I've been meditating for a while and I'm like, I'm having a hard time just sitting still hearing your distress. And I want to name that fact because actually it's completely relevant to the Dharma talk, and I'm going to be coming back to Ellen Bryan Voigt's poem, which talks about the sound of breathing. So, always Dharma grist for the mill, right? Like every moment, the world delivers us stuff that is directly relevant for our practice. But on a serious note, are you okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, and
The
just
mask help.
the mask help. Yeah, and thanks, I think, Joe and you. At one point, I almost leaped up. Sinead was like, I know how to take care of here. We're all like getting ready to, bodhisattvas that we are, leap into the fray. Okay. Everyone cool? All right. We've already started the talk, in case you hadn't noticed. So, the idea for this talk came to me on Tuesday. A very wise member of my Tuesday evening mindfulness group, which is not a Buddhist group at all, although many of the practitioners have been sitting what we would call Zazen, but sitting in a kind of open awareness practice for a long time. But this woman, she's been sitting with me for a long time now. And what we've been doing in that group, I have been structuring it. It's a Zoom group now. Since COVID, it's been on Zoom. I've been structuring it to invite participants to bring forward a question at the beginning, which then we can kind of chew on, and then I can kind of guide the meditation with that question in mind, sort of opening up the idea that actually practice is just question, is just cultivating this open heart, open palm, open mind of question. So I've been inviting people to bring forward a question. And this wise member of the group said, I'm not prepared or anything. I haven't really been thinking about this really, and this isn't going to be very eloquent. And then, of course, she went on to be completely eloquent, as people do. She said, this mindfulness practice has really taught me just about letting go. I'm paraphrasing her a bit, about letting go. And, you say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And now I'm wondering, what does matter? She's learned something that we all learn very directly, like not at a cosmic level, but it is pretty cosmic, in just a sitting meditation practice, right? Where we're like, GKA, when are you going to ring the damn bell, right? You're sitting here, you're thinking, how long is this going to last? And either the distress might be something inside, my knees hurt, I'm hot, I'm itchy, or it might be worrying about Sandy, on the outside, or maybe there's some commotion in the yard, right? But I mean, am I right here? Like so much of what it is to do sitting stillness meditation practice is grappling with, okay, it doesn't matter, it's okay, it doesn't matter. Like say that self-talk, right? That self-talk. My very first deep plunge into meditation was now 22 years ago. I went on, any of you know Goenka, SN Goenka, this sort of ish, this back in the day when it was called Burma, but this Myanmar industrialist entrepreneur who discovered Vipassana meditation, and it transformed him. I think he was a migraine sufferer, if I'm remembering correctly. And it really transformed him. And then he turned all of his expertise as a leader of industry and all of his financial wizardry into bringing Vipassana meditation, sort of what insight meditation, that meditation that is sort of mindfulness practice in the West, bringing it across the world. And you can go on a Goenka retreat technically for free. Actually, you can go on a retreat here at Buddha Eye for free, but I didn't know that at the time. Buddha, I didn't quite exist at the time in this form, because it's all donation based. So I was like, I gotta do this meditation thing. How do I do it? The internet basically didn't exist. I mean, it did sort of. I'm like looking in the phone book, and someone told me, oh, there's this place up in Washington, this Goenka retreat place called Dhamma Kunja in Washington State. I'm pointing up, which is ridiculous, but north of here. And so, GK, this is like what I was joking about this morning. Without reading any of the information, I just went on this retreat. I'm like, okay, I've got my ticket on the train, and I go. And it was 10 hours a day of sitting meditation, like all sitting. And then you would listen to literally a videotape of Goenka doing a Dharma talk, right? I mean, it was... So, and I just remember, so it's 10 days of 10 hours a day of stillness practice. And I learned very, very directly. It doesn't matter. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I learned what the Goenka talks about is in the very framework of your body, I learned the truth of what? Of impermanence, right? This too will pass. Like, I can sit through this. What arises will also pass away, right? I learned very, very directly this core teaching of Buddhism, which sometimes people talk about in terms of the 3 marks of existence. The mark of anicca, of impermanence, that everything that is conditioned arises and passes away. The mark of anatta, of no self, that there isn't this stable, enduring self. In fact, these 3 marks are really a syllogism. They're really an argument, like in 3 steps. So because everything arises and passes away, well, heck, guess what? There is no enduring, stable thing there, because everything is always changing. So anicca, anatta, impermanence, no self. And then guess what? The last beat in the syllogism, that's why life sucks. Dukkha, suffering, right? Anicca, anatta, dukkha. I learned this in the very framework of my body, ridiculously enough. But if the teaching here is, everything passes away, what does endure? What, if anything, endures? That is not a question I'm going to answer, but that is the question. That is the question. The question of what matters. Now, I am not full-time anymore, but I'm a hospital chaplain. Dokyu and Anyu are also hospital chaplains. Dokyu's actually working today. He relieved me on my shift. My passing of the Buddhist chaplains at the Catholic hospital. I love it. And Anyu, I think, is still out. She's not feeling well. But so, and there are other people here who have experience with hospice and chaplaincy and healthcare. The thing you see all the freaking time, that's the technical way to phrase it, in the hospital. And this may be why a lot of those of us who are drawn to healthcare are drawn to healthcare or to service in general. You see the ways in which crisis makes everything boil down to what matters. It all drops away, right? At that moment when the bottom of your universe falls out, right? There's not a lot that matters, but there are some things that matter, right? So that gorgeous poem that Jun-e, I was working last Sunday, so I wasn't able to be here to hear it, but I listened to you can listen to all of our Dharma talks. They're all live streamed. I'm pointing to the mic. They're live streamed on YouTube, and then you can go to the YouTube channel, the Buddha Eye YouTube channel. Love it. And listen to it. So I was able to hear your talk after the fact. But that beautiful Ellen Bryant Voigt poem that you shared, which I want to share again, because it speaks that truth of, the vigil, right? When everything falls away except for what matters. So this, for my mother. And by the way, Ellen Bryant Voigt also wrote a really, I didn't know this poem before you brought it forward, but she also wrote this beautiful series of poems called Kyrie, like Kyrie eleison, about the 1918 flu epidemic, which I haven't reread since COVID, but I think I should. It's a series of sonnets. So Ellen Bryant Voigt, she thinks about suffering, that one. So this is called For My Mother. When does the soul leave the body? Since early morning, you have not moved. Only your head moves, thrown back with each deliberate breath, the one sound that matters in the room. My brother is here, my sister, two of your sisters, ripples widening from the bed. The nurses check and measure, keeping the many records. Are you afraid? Are you dreaming of what is past, lost? Or is this sleep some other preparation? My sister has put your rings on my finger. It seems like your hand stroking the white brow, unable to release you, not even after you have asked for death. And we know nothing about such pain, except that it has weaned you from us and from the reedy, rusted sunflowers outside the window, dropping over the snow. I'm getting choked up here. Dropping over the snow like tongueless bells. We know nothing about such pain, except that it has weaned you from us and from the reedy, rusted sunflowers outside the window, dropping over the snow like tongueless bells. This is why I love poetry, right? Because, she's showing us what matters. She's telling us what matters is, this is why I was thinking of you, Sandy, what matters is that one sound of breathing. If you've ever been with someone in a very critical illness or at the deathbed vigil, the way you're just intent on this one beat of life. Maybe you're looking at the monitor, maybe you're listening to the sound. So that's, this is the one sound that matters. But then the poem is full of all the other things that also matter. Ending with that image of the sunflowers, which is such a beautiful image, such a resonant image. Outside the window, their life also waning. Right? So in some ways, this is a poem about waiting, right? About vigil, about life as waiting. Ironically, I wrote the next 3 words. I was working on my Dharma talk last night at the hospital on call, which is my want. Why do it ahead of time when you can do it at the very last minute? Yeah. So I was writing these 3 words. Waiting is hard. And then I got a phone call from my brother who needed to come to the emergency room. So I went, I got my brother, and I'm saying he's fine. His health is a little delicate, but he's fine. He's in a large sense, he's fine. And he was fine with this little crisis. But we're sitting in the waiting room right after I've written the words, waiting is hard. Anyone been in a hospital waiting room lately? Anyone been to Riverbend recently?
Mackenzie Millennium recently.
Oh my freaking. Anyway, there were hours. And then we just left at a certain point because he got his first set of results and everything was fine. But waiting, right? Waiting is the first really hard thing that we have to do as sentient beings. We're born like without language, without a sense of time. And this body of ours presses forward with needs. I want, I don't want. We don't even have the words I want, I don't want. All we have is crying, right? Thrashing. We have no sense of how long it will take for those needs to be met. We have no words to contain those needs. We have nothing to contain them. It's just, right? Pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling. This is dukkha, right? This is suffering. Pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling. I have to learn to wait. It is the first biggest lesson. It is the lesson of it all. How do I wait? How do I wait this out? Any of you?
Patiently?
What?
Patiently?
Well, with the, okay, so Mariah, I'm going to talk about patience in a second, but patiently is like the hospital is going to, how do you wait it out? Patiently.
You know what I call Riverbend? Riverbend Palace, Pavilion, Casino, Resort. I can tell you, if you have a brain disease,
Not a good, yeah.
you're not welcome.
Well, okay, so another Dharma talk, another topic, but
Yeah.
okay, but I hear you. So, any of you familiar with the marshmallow experiment? this Walter Mischel's work started in 1972.
No.
This is, okay, so I'll give you the thumbnail. And then you can go down the YouTube rabbit hole and the Google rabbit hole about it. So very influential set of experiments it's been updated, it's been revisited over the decades, it's been revised. There's a lot of pieces in the original experiment that needed, like dealing with class and race and gender. But the broad lines of it are they're just true. So what the original experiment was is he took, I'm trying to remember how old the kids were. I think they were, oh, I don't know. I don't have that in my notes. Little kids.
Between 5 and 8.
Between 5 and 8. Thanks, Chinkaku. And he said to the kids, I will give you one marshmallow. Or for the kids who didn't like sweets, I will give you one pretzel. Or if you can wait 15 minutes, I will give you 2. So, right? This is an experiment about waiting. Can we use the brainiac part of our brains, this thing that we Homo sapiens have evolved, this prefrontal cortex to like the executive function to say, just hold on. It doesn't matter. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. The bell will ring. The marshmallow will arrive. Or can we not? And it turns out that the kids who could wait 15 minutes, those kids, that ability to wait at the age of 5 to 8 correlated with like literally every marker of success that you can imagine, from like BMI, body mass index, like the sort of, the level of physical health, to earning potential, to educational outcomes, like everything. If you can wait for the second marshmallow, you're going to do well in life. It's the biggest lesson we learn. Waiting is hard, and when we learn it, we do well. It's also pretty much of an anchor within the Dharma, right? Waiting, patience, the virtue or paramita, perfection of Kshanti, is described in this 8th century text by this Indian Buddhist scholar, sage, monk, Shantideva. He talks about Kshanti, about the ability to forbear, to be with that I don't want to, or I want to, and not do anything. And he says, when the urge arises in your mind to feelings of desire, I want, or angry hate, when those, that's my sound effect. When the urge arises, do not act. Be silent, do not speak, and like a log of wood, be sure to stay. And why he says, I'm convinced he had the kind of temper I have, because he also says in the same text, The Way of the Bodhisattva, nothing can destroy the world of peace that you have built, like one angry word. Like in an instant, it's shattered. He says, getting what I do not want and all that hinders my desire, in discontent, my anger finds its fuel. From this it grows and beats me down. When I push or pull, I mean, he's talking about anger, but we could also equally talk about that movement of pulling that looks like desire often. When I do that, I just feed the fuel. I mean, I just fuel the fire, right? He's saying, wait, the second marshmallow will come. I believe that Shantideva sat in a lot of waiting rooms, right? And, this is super true when there's something at stake, but waiting is hard even when there's nothing at stake. I used to smoke a lot of filter cigarettes. I love my filter cigarettes. My favorite time to smoke cigarettes, besides every time, was when I was waiting. Like, it took me years after I quit smoking to realize I could wait for the bus without needing a cigarette. Now I have a smartphone, so I don't even need a cigarette now, right? Waiting, I'm serious though, waiting is hard. Why? Even when there's not, we have to create something to grind on, right? To get through the waiting. What is that about? I think waiting is hard. This is what, was crystal clear last night in the hospital, and this may have to do with Riverbend Casino, as you said. Waiting is hard because it puts in our face this truth that we are not in control. Right? Through waiting, we learn about what is at the very core of the Heart Sutra that we chant every Sunday morning, that there isn't this self that can push the world. No eye, no ear, no tongue, no blah, 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 blah. None of it's here. The sutra, the discourse, the holy discourse that the Buddha is said to have given as his second sermon. So the first sermon was on the Four Noble Truths. The second sermon was the sermon on no self, the Anattalankana Sutta, the sutra on the mark of no self, that mark of existence I was talking before, anatta, anicca, dukkha. I want to read a bit from this sutra. This is one of the classic sources where the Buddha is basically right in sync with what we've heard from Shantideva, right in sync with what Walter Mischel with the marshmallow experiment demonstrated, which is you're not in control. So now control yourself. All right, so I'm going to just read a bit from this sutra. It's not very long. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Benares in the park at Isapatana. There, the Buddha addressed the group of 5 mendicants. So it's that second sermon of his, he's still talking to the 5 people that he started his path with. So these are his closest comrades, and he's just been enlightened. He's like, let me tell you what I've discovered. Right? He says, mendicants, right? Monks, wandering monks. Venerable sir, they replied, the Buddha said this, mendicants, form, and the Sanskrit word he's using is, the Sanskrit word for form here is rupa, which just means like phenomenon, like appearance, like the way the world appears to us. And it's one of the 5 aggregates that compose all things according to kind of Buddhist psychology and cosmology. So in the Heart Sutra, no eye, no ear, no tongue, no da-da-da. When we go through those lists of no's, the 5 aggregates are one of the sets of items in those lists, and it's the 5 aggregates that Shariputra tells us. It hears from Avalokiteshvara. Someone help me here. Okay, let me just read. So it's so funny when you can't do this thing that you chant all the time. The Heart Sutra, the beginning of the Heart Sutra that we just chanted. Avalokiteshvara went. Thank you. Reiko, say it out loud.
And deeply practicing prajna paramita clearly saw that all 5 aggregates are empty.
And thus relieved all suffering. Thank you. We'll add the human memory to the thing that has to drop away. Okay. So at the heart of the Heart Sutra is this idea that the 5 aggregates that make us, right, of which form is one, they all drop away. They're all empty. They're not things we can hold on to and contain, right? And that is what relieves all suffering. So in this early sutra, the Buddha is articulating this same teaching. He says, mendicants, form, phenomena, is not self. For if form were self, it wouldn't lead to dukkha, it wouldn't lead to suffering. And you could not compel form. And you could compel form. May my form be like this, may it not be like that. But because form is not self, it leads to suffering. And you can't compel form. May my form be like this, may it not be like that. And then he goes on and he goes through all the list of all the things that you could compartmentalize the world. He says, feeling is not self. For if feeling were self, it would lead to suffering. It wouldn't lead to suffering, sorry. And you could compel feeling. May my feeling be like this, may it not be like this. But because feeling is not self, it leads to suffering. And you can't compel feeling. May my feeling be like this, may it not be like this. He says perception is like that. Choices are like that. Mind is like that. If mind were self, it wouldn't lead to suffering. And you could compel mind. May my mind be like this. May it not be like that. May I stop being anxious. May I not be anxious. May my mind not be depressed. May I, right? The Buddha's going through all of these things. And he says, what do you think, mendicants, is mind, form, feeling, all the things we could list? Are they permanent or impermanent? And the monks say, impermanent, sir. And he says, but if it's impermanent, is it suffering or happiness? And they say, well, suffering, Buddha, suffering. And then the Buddha says, but if it's impermanent, suffering, and perishable, is it fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, I am this is myself? No, sir. You see what he's doing here? He's like, if these things, these parts of us were real, we could tell them what to do. If they were me, if I am my mind, if I am my body, if I am my heart, if I am my eyes, then I could compel these things in the same way that any possession that I have, I can do what I like with it. But I can't compel these things. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. So is this suffering? Yeah. Is this me? No. This is the Buddha's deep teaching. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. And then we hear, while the discourse was being spoken, the minds of the group of 5 mendicants were freed from defilements by not grasping. So, oh, it's not me. I won't hold on to this. Mm-hmm. But if this is not me, what is me? Right? We're back to this question of what matters. So we got this conundrum here. And this is sort of the whole point of what I'm sharing. We got this conundrum here that waiting teaches us about. We've got this conundrum here, which is that my suffering could be relieved the minute I realize that's not me. But then what is me? Which is a thought that brings suffering, which is why waiting is hard. So what do we do when we reach conundra like this? Poetry. So what is mine? What am I? What is myself? Jun-e, I'm going to steal from you again. I'm going to come back to Dylan Thomas, but a different Dylan Thomas, okay? And this is a poem that I also didn't know about, but I discovered because I've been reading this book, and this is something to talk about, but I want to talk about All the Livelong Day, not this particular book, but the archetypal work that this book is talking about. It's a book by Sumong Kid and her daughter, Ann Kidd Taylor, called Traveling with Pomegranates, a mother-daughter story, and it's about the Demeter and Persephone myth, and it's really about how we work with archetypes. And she quotes this Dylan Thomas poem, and this is the Dylan Thomas poem she quotes. It's called The Force That Through the Green Fuse Drives the Flower. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower.
Myobun?
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
The force that through the green fuse drives the flower. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age. That blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood. That dries the mouthing streams turns mine to wax. And I am dumb to mouth onto my veins how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand. The ropes that blowing wind hauls my shroud sail. And I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The lips of time leach to the fountain head. Love drips and gathers, but the falling blood Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars. Okay, the imagery is a little bit dense, and the word dumb here is being used not to mean stupid, but to mean I can't speak. But this is a poem about the way in which the green fuse of life, that green sap that makes life happen, is also the same thing that makes death happen. That the water that pulses through the rocks is also my red blood pulsing through my veins. That I am connected in my life, in that green fuse of my life, to my death and to all of death and to all of life. What do you say to all of this? This is Dylan Thomas saying, what can I say? You know, life and death, they're interwoven. what do I do with that? We are dumb in the face of time, which is why waiting freaking sucks. There's nothing to say because time is what brings us what we want and time is what brings us what we don't want. And this is why I smoke cigarettes for so many years rather than just wait, right? This is why patience, if it's just about sitting still, that doesn't really satisfy because that green fuse of life is pushing, pushing, pushing at the same time that I know it's pulling, pulling, pulling. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, what is this green fuse? What is this green fuse that in Dylan Thomas's words, the green fuse that the force that through the green fuse drives the flower? What is this green fuse and what is that force? What? As Hojo-san would say, yeah. What? What is the force that drives the green fuse that drives through us? What? What is it?
I'm thinking of it.
I'm not asking for an answer. I'm asking, no. We want to answer.
It's a rhetorical question.
It's not a rhetorical question. Here's my beef with rhetorical questions, right? Rhetorical questions are like answers, right? They're not questions. This is a question. What matters? That green fuse that drives the flower, the force through the green fuse that drives the flower. Okay, one last little bitty poem. Mm-hmm. This is one of Dogen, the founder of our lineage in Japan, 13th century. It's just 3 lines. The world, question mark, the world, moonlit drops shaking from the crane's bill. The world, moonlit drops shaken from the crane's bill. What matters? Okay, let me pause, and we've got a few minutes for questions, comments, and for answers. If you yeah.
So is it up for interpretation, or it's all just a question that doesn't have an answer? Is it something for us as individuals to answer, or is it just a question we continuously ask ourselves with no answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One way to pick this up, and this is why I mentioned archetypes and Persephone and Demeter, is like, okay, what is the green fuse that drives? I keep having to go. Dylan Thomas's syntax is so beautiful and complicated. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower. What's my green fuse? What's my flower? What's the force? So I can only talk about like the framework of this body, heart, and mind. Like, yeah, what is my green fuse? That's one way I'm asking this question. What is the force that I'm feeling through the green fuse? What would flowering be? And I kind of take this on faith, but the other part of the Dylan Thomas poem and all poetry, and then what Jun-e was sharing with us about dying last week, and I think like every Dharma talk ever from all time brings this forward, this interconnectedness of all things. I asked this question for myself. I'm asking the question the question's being asked in this human life. The question. What? I don't know, did that?
Yeah, I think it did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Jun-e.
Well, I have a sort of funny story about Goenka. My oldest son, long ago, he was very young then, he saw some notice in Santa Cruz for a retreat, and he was becoming interested in Buddhism. So he decided to go. So this was with nothing, 10 days in an open area in Santa Cruz next to a horse pasture. So there were flies. He said he thought he was going to die, although he took up the practice with Goenka, and Goenka was there that
Oh,
time
wow.
and dressed in white. And he said that no fly ever landed on Goenka.
Love it. Yeah. I remember every second of that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I seem to remember with the marshmallow experiment that there were not only correlations with the kids that could wait and their future success, but the kids who could wait and their home life,
Yes.
their
Yes.
how securely attached
Yeah.
they were.
The
to
number of
their parents.
aces, we'd say. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I wonder what you think about what that points us to
Yeah.
in terms of setting ourselves up to be able to wait, self-care wise and otherwise, versus force of will,
Yeah.
or both, and how they balance each other.
Yeah, I think I have done a lot of damage to myself in the name of willpower, right? Because I think there is a kind of, and when we were doing the Bodhisattva practice group and talking about the Shantideva image, the image of the log, sitting like a log, it's like, this sounds like suppression. I mean, this is certainly repression. Like, really? How much do I want to like sit on my feelings? So willpower seems like, I mean, there's a, how do I want to put this? We have to figure out where that line is between this self-violence and self-care, because what seems to be at stake, coming back to this idea of waiting as the first task we learn as babies, how did we learn that it would be okay to have the needs that were arising in our little body? How did we learn that it was okay? Was there a container around us where that was held so that we could feel it and have space to feel it and not have our little nervous system blown out by it, right? So those attachments at the very, very earliest stages, I mean, all of us were messed up by our parents, right? And all of us who are parents have messed up our kids, right? I mean, sorry, Maeve. But right, all of us, right? No one is perfect. But fortunately, the work of learning how to have that sense of healthy attachment in that container, that's something that we actually practice. And guess what? We practice it here in Zazen, where what we learn in a nice practice community like Buddha Eye, where there's kind people and yummy treats after assembly, and we learn, okay, I can sit with this discomfort. We learn right now the stuff that maybe when, little Myobun, which she didn't learn. She had to figure it out herself. And so she became a control freak. Just saying. I mean, just hypothetically showing a hypothetical biography here, right? Does this make sense, though? So fortunately, the learning that waiting isn't waiting. Waiting is being human. Hopefully fortunately that learning happens all lifelong. And I think the more recent versions of the marshmallow experiment have worked with how do you address this? Like, not just let's demonstrate this fact, but what are the interventions that we can do in early childhood and in like maybe our systems of economics that might make a difference for all of us.
Continuing on in the same vein, I think where patience changes from being a skill that we can talk about with the marshmallow experiment and being a perfection as a path to liberation, which is what we're talking about with Kshanti, is that it becomes not willpower. It becomes not waiting for the marshmallow. The kind of Zen way to say it is the bell's never going to ring, the marshmallow is never going to come. It's about where is the liberation, the total freedom in not getting the thing, not waiting anymore, just being.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was beautiful. Yeah, exactly.
And
I guess it just comes to those causes and conditions, I feel like. But I was tickled by, you were talking about the importance of waiting, and then you were talking about the Heart Sutra, and you said, but don't worry, it's really short.
Yeah. And then I couldn't remember the actual line of the heart. There's that too. Yeah. All right.
Interestingly enough, during the 15 years that I had this diagnosis related to my brain, it's I'm getting gradually some clarity around it. And talking about waiting, I remember as a child, I was the youngest of three, and my mother always commented on how patient I could be.
Mm-hmm.
Patient, quiet, calm, patient. And then there was my sister, middle child, like my mom, rapid, just reacts, responds. In a good way, she's dramatic. She brought all of these things that for some reason, that just wasn't my temperament. I was patient.
Yeah.
Calm. Here's an interesting thing. So I get diagnosed with this illness postmenopausally. Unusual. Well, here's the diagnosis now. It's not the psychiatric diagnosis of bipolar. I reject it because it doesn't speak to the etiology of the illness. Here's the new diagnosis. It's something called HPA axis, and mine's dysfunctional. And the HPA axis refers to the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland.
Yeah. So these are,
Anyway, I could go on.
Yeah.
If you want more explanation, it's all rather interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes down to the anatomy and physiology of the brain with which you were born.
Yep.
The patience isn't easy
Right.
for you.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.